As we hurtle headlong into the digital age, pause to ponder just how far we've come. The 80s generation had no .com, no digital. The future they imagined has been transformed by a technology revolution. My, how we've changed. Welcome to a short history of the modern world, charting the good and bad of a quarter century of innovation. This is Stop Rewind. Be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. It doesn't matter if it's on the road, in the air, underground, overseas, expensive, cheap, ingenious, utterly practical, wired, hired, or lowered. We all need a roof over our head. But no one ever said that the roof, the walls, windows, doors, floors, and ceiling that go with it had to look the same. Funnily enough, the way we build houses hasn't changed much since the days of the pharaohs. But in the last 30 years, rising populations, urban overcrowding, and changing technology has had a big say in what we build them from and where we build them. On this episode, we're going to open the doors, peer under the beds, and poke around the kitchen cupboards of what we all thought would become the home of the 21st century. There was a time when a house reflected your personality. These days, it's more likely to have its own personality.
Hello, good to see you again.
If Dutch electronics giant Philips has its way, 21st century homes will be run by a talking pet cum remote control called the iCat.
You had one visitor this morning. I will show his message on the TV screen.
Who needs a guard dog when an online feline can do it all for you? Honey, did you remember to turn the cat off? And here's something to reflect on. A mirror which knows your name, tells you your weight, updates the traffic, shows you the back of your head, and gives you the weather forecast. The guys in the white coats call it ambient intelligence. It's the third generation of smart houses. The first had interconnected devices with a central control, and the second could be programmed to recognize predefined scenarios. The ultimate goal will be to produce a building that can not only recognize, but also react to different situations. In other words, think for itself. So much for the future, but what about the past? Back in the 80s, a smart house was still a smart thing to have, especially if you were smart to begin with.
I've lived my whole life being interested and really loving technology.
Meet Portia, PhD. That's her qualification, not her surname. Back in 1986, when you actually needed a few degrees to become a computer whiz, she forked out over $2 million on a house that took the hassle out of having to talk to people.
We are unable to come to the door at this time. If you will face the doorbell light, you may leave a 30-second video message at the sound of the beep. Beep.
Howdy, would y'all like to buy a vacuum cleaner?
You are not allowed in the pool. Get out.
Forget pesky salesmen and curious kids, and that's just for starters.
People who deliver the dry cleaning are only allowed to come into the front door closet, and the security system tracks where they are.
Presumably, that left Portia free to use one of her 16 phones, 13 computers, and 20 TVs.
House, media room, watch, NBC, TV, please. It's very important that you say please.
Portia was a personal computer pioneer, but her dream home was inspired by a much more powerful force.
You have all of these different gadgets where you can pick up the phone and tell the house what to do. Isn't that a little lazy?
Oh, yes, and I love it.
Across the Atlantic, the British took a more egalitarian approach. Vision 2020 was designed by the Royal College of Art in 1987. And, unlike Portia's pad, visitors were positively encouraged, 160,000, including the Queen. Maybe she just wanted to downsize. At a time when prices were growing and houses were shrinking, this concept building was based around moving walls and components to maximise space.
And this rather whimsical design here for what's called the Reassurance Centre, where you can be tested for heart, breath, and other parts of the anatomy.
Other eccentricities included an anti-gravity suit, gravity-defying cutlery, a computerised coat rack, and a laundry that did the ironing. But some of the crystal ball gazing was closer to the mark.
In fact, workstations like this will deliver a whole range of information, some of it good, some of it bad. In fact, the terminal itself will be very much a part of our life by the year 2020, and hopefully it will open up a whole new range of possibilities.
Of course, the Japanese were always going to put in their 2 yen's worth. In the smart Japanese home of 1987, you could switch appliances off and on with a simple phone call.
This is the control panel which has been answering my calls. I can also control it manually, from the lights and power points to the door locks.
12 years later, the Japanese houses were so smart they could hang up their shingle. Not feeling the best in the morning? The house could diagnose your illness thanks to a built-in online medical kit. If it's a change in diet you need, the terminal in the dining room could provide the right meals. There's no excuse for being sick in this home. But 3 decades ago, progressive homeowners didn't always look to the future for their inspiration. The 70s global energy crisis meant we couldn't bury our heads in the sand anymore. But we could bury our houses. Cool in summer, warm in winter.
Just the wood stove.
A wood-burning stove, and that's it.
That's all we have. We come home and start a fire, and we probably get our house warmer than most people do.
Okay, there's a small question of greenhouse gases, but hey, one crisis at a time, right? We were still trying to get our heads around this radical concept of working with nature, not against it.
The earth, the rock, the sun, the water, whatever. You can use it all and, make it work for you.
Well, that's not such a prehistoric notion, is it?
We were teased a tremendous amount about, how can you build a house like that? I mean, that's crazy. That's the Flintstones way of living.
This definitely wasn't Flintstones. Geodesic domes were built just after World War I, and they had a brief resurgence in the 80s when kit homes hit home.
That basic geodesic dome comes as one basic package, and this is it. This bundle contains all the struts, all the plywood covering ready cut, all the bolts, and the hub.
The pluses? Well, no internal support meant lots of space, and you could put windows wherever you liked, so you could have light right through the day. The minuses? Well, don't try sending misbehaving kids to the naughty corner in a dome. Despite the hype, domes never really made it to the mainstream. If you go down to the woods today, you could still be in for a big surprise, 30 metres above the ground.
No matter what happens out there, I feel safe in here. I'm in my little nutshell.
Welcome to the Nut House, the free spirit sphere. Perfect for tree huggers who want to upscale to tree dwellers.
As the name suggests, this bubble in the sky is all about freedom.
The wooden version of this ultimate treehouse would set you back $100 grand. But if the price tag, not to mention the irony, was a problem, then you could go fiberglass for a third of that. Either way, you got mains or generated power, hot and cold running water, and all the mod cons. Well, almost.
Where's the loo, though? That's my only concern.
The loo is about 25 meters down the path.
20 minutes to hoist the 250-kilo pod on ropes with a 5-ton braking strain and a week to install the spiral staircase. It's what the greenies like to call a very small environmental footprint.
I've had the sphere up in a grove of trees for 3 years and then moved it out, and all that's left is the path.
You only have to look around your average suburb in your average developed country to know that we like our housing simple. Brick venereal disease is how one wag put it. But sometimes what goes into making our little boxes on the hillside is far from ordinary. They may look the same from the outside, but you never know what's on the inside. In 1986, an English company invented houses made from the catch of the day.
This house was almost entirely built with polyurethane foam building blocks, the main constituent of which is fish oil.
All right, it was a slight exaggeration. But watch what happens when the man in the white coat combines an isocyanide chemical with fish oil. Presto, a toxic fish souffle, or a cheap polyurethane foam. A house made from these 60 centimetre square blocks had great insulation and was extremely light.
Half as heavy as a standard house.
Which made it cheaper and easier to build.
And I'm told that a husband and wife could build a house like this in as little as 1 month.
Unfortunately, we'll never know how long it took an unmarried couple because fish houses were the one that got away. But this next technology was neither fish nor fowl. It's a rammed earth house, and in 1988, building one was the most fun you could have in tight red shorts. New techniques meant this caveman technology was back on the block without too much back-breaking work. There's nothing revolutionary about earth houses. They've been around in many cultures for 10,000 years or so. And about 1/3 of the world's population still live in them. This version had great insulation, fireproofing, and cyclone resistance, and considering the 80s was the decade that style forgot, it didn't look all that bad on the inside either. But before you start getting too touchy-feely, some new age houses were getting built from bio bricks. These were bricks made from recycled human waste. Full marks for recycling, but would you really want to live in something that was built from, well, how do you explain the smell? Flushed with success, the Boffins started coming up with all sorts of unusual ideas for cheap, durable housing materials.
Cement, which floats.
No, it's not fish oil again. It's a lightweight, waterproof concrete made from pumice. 76% of Iceland is covered with the stuff because it sits on a chain of volcanoes which spew forth once every 5 years. They even created a whole new island in 1967. With no naturally occurring timber for housing, pumice concrete was a cheap, workable alternative.
You can knock nails into it. You can drill it. And you can drive a screw straight into it.
It was also waterproof and absorbed sound, which would have been particularly useful when all those volcanoes were erupting. So let's hear it for pumice concrete. Taking a leaf out of Iceland's books, the brainiacs in Australia started mucking around with something they had plenty of.
This country has 150 million sheep, and all I want is one.
Not sheep, just the wool off their backs. Sheep don't keel over in Australia's dry heat, so it figures that wool must have some serious insulating qualities. Scientists compared two identical buildings, one lined with polyurethane foam, which may or may not have been made from fish, and the other lined with a specially treated wool. Now, pure wool doesn't come cheap, so cost was a big factor. But get this, even if every building in Australia had switched to wool insulation, it would only have taken up 4% of the entire wool stock. So next time you can't sleep, try counting the walls. Over in South Africa, they took a more lightweight approach to providing affordable housing for the millions of people who were crowded into the nation's shanty towns. Reinforced foam panels, the equivalent of 50 standard bricks, locked into place, then filled with cement. It sounds a bit like living inside a takeaway coffee cup. But in places where families have to build shacks from whatever they can scrounge, it made sense. Need to start a new wall? No problems. Grab a handsaw and cut to length. Need to put in a power outlet? That's a penknife job, easy. Surprisingly, the foam is 5 times as durable as conventional bricks and mortar, and had 5 times the insulation capacity in both summer and winter. For $2,000, one could be knocked up in a week by a couple of unskilled workers. Imagine what 1 million unskilled workers would do. Inventor Etienne Basson could.
And you give them the whole year to build it out. Not a month or a week, a whole year. End of the year, you've built 500,000 homes. So in 3 years, you can rehouse Africa.
New Mexico, USA is famous for its adobe buildings. They're based on traditional Native American designs, but in 1992, tradition got a modern-day kick in the pants. A house where the trash never made it past the front door. Old tires rammed with 150 kilos of earth provided stability in wet or dry conditions, with discarded cans embedded in the earth in between. You could call it a new twist on trailer trash, but biotech Michael Reynolds preferred the term Earthship, an independent vessel designed to take the strain off the environment and the hip pocket.
Very similar to the way a hitchhiker gets out on the highway and starts to hitchhike. We hitchhike a ride with the sun, with gravity, with thermal mass, with rain. And it turns out that that will carry us everywhere.
So far, Michael's Earthships have made it as far as Europe, Africa, and South America. So if you ever see one of these piles of garbage for sale, drop in and have a look. Tire kickers are definitely welcome. It's one thing combing through the garbage bins, the seas, the volcanoes, the cafeterias, and yes, perhaps even the toilets of the world, looking for alternative building materials. The other big challenge of the last 30 years has been space. As economic pressures force more and more people into the cities, urban density increases, prices rise, and quality housing becomes less and less affordable for more and more of the population. We can't make more space, so we've had to use what we have more effectively.
From the outside, it looks little more than an oversized tin can. But this module is the basis for a space-saving housing program. It's cheap, fast to install, and can be built on the factory floor in just 12 minutes.
It was an idea as simple as it was clever. A continuous steel spiral with a patented locking system. So no rivets or screws. Plug enough of them into a central service column, and this is what you got. It was a high-rise answer to high prices and rising populations. But so far, this 80s modular vision of the future is yet to be seen. The Autopod is also something you won't see. But then again, that's the whole point. If you're the sort of person who can't remember where you've parked your car in a shopping mall, then you might not like the thought of burying your car in the front yard. But in a city like London, with problems like overcrowding and personal security issues, the Autopod makes sense, aesthetically and security-wise. Or you might just want to hide the fact that your other car is a Rover Montego, just like this one. That left you free to park your Ferrari on top of it for all the world to see. What if the issue is a combination of space and speed? What you may see around cities like London are these. Houses on the back of a truck. The idea is as simple as it is cheap. Prefab a whole house in a factory in Poland, then move it like giant building blocks, pop it into place, and you're home. Literally in this case. Instead of a year to build, try 10 days. All you have to do is plug in the power and the water. Fast? Sure, but nowhere near the record. How fast a house can be erected, especially in times of natural disaster, can mean a huge difference in the quality of life. In 1992, a South African architect called Solomon Kessler took origami to a whole new level.
Autopod is trying to give shelter to the destitute, to the homeless, not only here, but wherever there are refugees.
With FolderPod, you could literally get your house off the back of a truck, drive in, lift and lower, then unfold all in a matter of hours. Not quite a house, but much more sophisticated than a tent and much more weather resistant thanks to a specially treated industrial band-aid.
One working shift of 5 hours per day can in fact manufacture close to 700 houses per month.
However, there was no truth to the rumour that making 1,000 of these origami houses brought you good luck. Our increasingly volatile climate has begun to threaten our notions of traditional housing. So, technology has come up with more and more sophisticated solutions. Where else but earthquake-prone alternative Los Angeles could you find a house like this? Take one maverick architect, throw in a splash of nature, and mix it all up with a touch of Dali, and you've got a house that challenges conventional design and withstands earthquakes.
So the box is inherently a very weak structure, and nature would never use it.
Maybe not, but nature would never build kitchen colander air vents in its houses, or come up with something called a nostril window.
In the summertime, you pull them out, and you can feel the air come through. In the wintertime, if it gets too cold, you simply shut it. And they also act as windows.
Nostril window? You hope it never catches a cold. Over in the flood-prone Netherlands, architects face a different environmental challenge. Floods. The answer? A house that can swim. These floating Dutch houses, anchored by steel pylons, could be a blueprint for delta regions all over the world. In a flood, the house can travel 3 meters or 10 feet up the pylon before reaching the top. For this house to disappear, the rest of Holland would have to disappear first. $315,000 each, but at least you're not paying for land value. Despite all of these grand visions for housing in the future, nothing has changed over the past 30 years when it comes to what we want from our houses. But the people who put them together have.
I'm configuring the televisions and the computer monitors.
I'm adding extra sensors to the smart floor.
I'm just doing some light reading, Cisco Catalyst 2950 switch installation guide.
I am programming the kitchen appliances.
Oh man, I'm installing a new motion sensor in the living room, and it's so hot in here.
Me? I am making coffee.
All that work so the owners don't have to do a thing.
TV mode on.
And that's just fine, because all these motion sensors, remote appliances, and back-to-base monitoring mean our rapidly aging population can lead increasingly independent, secure lives.
Voice command, going to sleep.
Please close the window before you go to sleep.
So a check.
Ah, home smart home. So, what will future homes be like? Will they continue to evolve with technology to become smarter and do our domestic thinking for us? Will they become smaller, tailored to the individual's needs rather than the family's? Will they be cheaper, disposable modules to cater for millions of poor and homeless, victims of economic or climatic pressures? Whichever way we go, the basic need to put a roof over our heads is sure to be a weird, wonderful, and fascinating reflection of the way we'll go about living our lives in the 21st century.